Hello, everyone. I've got an exciting author here who is going to be launching his book, and I know that it's really current and everyone's going to be really excited to read this book. Now, we have Mark, and I can never get it right, but I'm going to give it a go, and I know it's going to sound nothing like you do, but it's Mark van Rijmenam, but I know I'm not doing it right. So can you introduce yourself the right way?
Sure, it's Mark van Rijmenam. And very nice to be here, Susan.
Beautiful. I will continue to call you Mark throughout this because I can never get the roll of my tongue like you do. Mark is the world's number one futurist. And why is that so important? Because we're all learning so much about AI and the future and what's happening. So Mark's amazing book is called Now What? Which is really, I think, relevant because it is now what? Things are changing so much and how to ride the tsunami of change. So I know that there's a lot in this book. I mean, look at this book. It's really hard to hold up. It's that heavy. So there's lots of content. But before we get into the content for the listeners and the watchers here today, can you tell me, Mark, just sum up kind of why you wrote the book and just a very snippet into the title itself and why it's called Now What? How to Ride the Tsunami of Change. So why did you write the book first?
Why did I write a book? Well, I wanted to write another book, so this is my sixth book, and my previous books have all been very technology focused. So my first book was on big data, second book was on blockchain, my third book was a management book version of my doctorate, which was on blockchain, big data, and AI. My fourth book was on the metaverse. My fifth book was written with AI. And for this book, I thought I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to take a step back because when I give keynotes all around the world, and the common denominator is that almost all business leaders that I talk to are like in this frenzy of, I don't know what to do. They're in this fight, flight, or freeze mode of, because there's so much disruption going on. It's not only technological, it's also ecological, it's also geopolitical. And they are just all like, now what do we do? And so that's really where it came from, where I was looking to find an answer on helping individuals, organizations, societies to understand, one, what is going on, and two, how can we deal with that? And three, how can we make sure that the way we deal with it is done in a way that's beneficial to everyone? So how can we design and build a better future for everyone?
I absolutely love that and so relevant right now. And I know in this new book, Now What? It offers really practical approach to emerging technology through the WAVE framework, which stands for watch, adapt, verify, and empower. And can you explain just the basis of that framework? Because I know that it's a really good example of when applying these steps, how it can lead to significant breakthroughs and successful pivots for these organizations.
Sure. So when I was trying to find an answer of how to ride a tsunami of change, I came with two answers. One was a very long-term answer of where we use education to change generations over time, to become more adaptable to change and to embrace change in a more harmonious fashion. And we build responsible technology throughout our society. That's the very long-term perspective, which I think is really important to build a better future for all of us. Now, that takes time, that takes decades. So we need a solution that organizations, but also individuals can apply today. And that's where the wave forward framework comes into play, where, as you said correctly, we watch for signals to understand how the world is changing, because we need to understand what's happening. Because if you don't know what's happening, we can't prepare for ourselves. We can't.
Yeah, we're running blind if we're not aware.
Absolutely. And this awareness is something that I find is absolutely crucially important in a world that is changing so fast, because I believe that around the world, there might be, this is a number on top of my head, it's like maybe 10,000 people who have an understanding of what is going on, how the world is changing. That means pretty much 8 billion people don't know. And that is really problematic, because it means we are not in control in how we want to design and build the future for our kids. So we need to understand what is going on. So we watch for signals, short-term signals, long-term signals, and try to make sense of the environment around us, whether you're an individual, an organization, or society, so that you can at least understand what's going on. Now, once you understand how your environment is changing, you can then start to adapt. And we can't be stuck in our grounds. We need to be flexible. We need to move, go with the flow, but we need to do so with a long-term purpose in mind. Because if we shift every shareholder meeting, which is what's happening at the moment, that's not going to do it. Moreover, all the AI models that we are building today, they will be the foundations of the AI models tomorrow. So we want to have this long-term perspective when we adapt to the changes that we are signaling. The third step is then once we see the signals, we adapt to it, we want to make sure that we do it in a responsible, ethical, and a secure way, because we now live in a world where trust and truth basically no longer exist anymore. Deep fakes, it's so easy to be anyone. The scams are becoming so sophisticated that it's very difficult to make sure that we can trust what we do. So we have to verify. We have to verify our data. Am I dealing with the person that I think that I'm dealing with via text, audio, or video? Has my data not been tampered with? Where we can use, for example, blockchain technology. Really understanding how can we verify that the signals that we're seeing, that we're adapting to, that we're doing this in a way that is trustworthy and that's beneficial for society, for your organization, for your employees, for your customers. The final phase is we then want to empower. We want to empower not only yourself, but all your stakeholders to do the same thing. So everyone, that means you need to change your culture. You need to embrace education. You need to embrace lifelong learning. You need to help your stakeholders, not just your shareholders, not just your employees, but also your customers, all your partners, the partnerships that you work with other organizations, or if it comes to individuals, your partners, your life partners. You want to take them with you. You want to empower them through knowledge, through awareness, through education to do the same thing. Then if we watch for signals, we adapt with long-term purpose, we verify our data, and we empower through education, then I believe we have a formula to ride this tsunami of change.
And I think that there's a lot of fear that comes up with this change, and the fear and the anxiety at the moment is artificial intelligence going to take over. What advice for both individuals and companies when it comes to using AI ethically but effectively, and how to embrace it rather than be in fear of it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. And that's why I really tried with my book to have this really optimistic outlook to the world. Although I do see myself as an optimistic dystopian, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but it helps me to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of technology. But because so much change is happening, I think it's helpful to have an optimistic approach to the future. And
Yeah.
that fear that a lot of people have, that is justified to a certain extent. Absolutely. Because AI, robotics, automation, they will have affect millions, if not a billion jobs by the end of this decade. It will have a big impact. But if we are just being in a freeze mode and we're not going to adapt or we're not going to act, yes, then it will have a negative, very negative impact. What we need to do is we need to adapt ourselves as an employee, as a manager, as a leader. We need to adapt. We need to focus on the skills that really matter. Digital literacy, futurist thinking, ethics, adaptability, analytical skills to understand what's happening. And if we do that, then I do believe that we are more in control of what's happening. We are more in control of how the world is changing. And you're no longer a bystander, but you're an active participant in shaping that future that is beneficial for everyone. So yes, some fear is justified. I don't think robots will be roaming the streets like in RoboCop anytime soon. But it is important to know that the technology today is already so powerful that in the wrong hands, it can already do significant damage to society. And there are countless examples already on that, unfortunately.
And I
We
think
need to be aware what's going on.
yeah, and I think that awareness, like you said, and rather than being in fear, be aware and look at how you can adapt. So I love what you have inside of the book to really cover that and the principles and, like I said, the WAVE framework, and that really brings it all home. You suggest in the book that you can become architects of tomorrow, which I love. What qualities or mindsets do you believe are most crucial for individuals and organizations to cultivate in order to actively shape a thriving business? And one of them you just said is like to not be in fear and not react to it, but be educated, other than grab your book and start reading and educating themselves. But is there anything else that they could do to actively shape a thriving future?
Look, I think maybe it's important to understand why I call myself an architect of tomorrow and why I want everyone to become architects of tomorrow. Because, as I said earlier, I see myself as an optimistic dystopian, which is a bit of a negative approach to it. And while I was writing the book, I came to embrace the paradigm of architect of tomorrow, because it's a lot more optimistic, because it shows that I am responsible myself for designing and building a better future. And if I can be responsible myself for designing and building a better future for myself, for my family, for my surroundings, for my country, then everyone should be able to do that. And so that's why I opted for architect of tomorrow. And I think everyone should become and should be responsible for their own future. As I said, fear, yes, is justified to a certain degree, but one thing that we should not do is sit back and let the future just happen to us. What then will happen is what has happened sort of in the past 2 decades, that we will sleepwalk into a future that is not necessarily beneficial to us. And we sort of sleepwalked in this digital age. We use all these tools, we doom scroll all the time on our phones, and we're not really aware of what's going on and how it's affecting our minds. We're not teaching the next generation in ways that is beneficial for them, nor for us. So we have a few challenges there. So if we become more architects of tomorrow, if we understand how the world is changing, if we understand what kind of future we would like to see, then we can actively start building that. And that's why futurist thinking is what I discuss in the book as well, is really important, where we take this long-term approach and we do scenario planning of what can happen, how can the world change, what is possible. And then if we have these different scenarios, we can then say, okay, I want this part of that and I want this from that, and then we can start to actively design the future that we want. And once we've designed it, then we can start building it. So start with awareness, then understanding what can be possible, then design, and then build. And that's why when I talk to organizations, I often always recommend them to hire like a science fiction writer, because science fiction writers are so good at sort of seeing the improbable, understanding what is possible in the years, decades ahead. And that's also why I included the science fiction story in my book, to help people understand these very intangible and abstract concepts, to make them more tangible, because then we can start to see the future, and then we can start to become actively involved in creating this future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I love about the book, is that sometimes we can get caught up in these books that just become overwhelming, but the way that you seed in the fictional stories that come in to help people comprehend it more makes this book very unique, and something that I think anyone will get, individuals, organizations will get so much out of it. So one of the last questions I want to ask is, I know that there's so much, like I said, in the book. So as I said, quite a thick book. There's a lot jam-packed in there, and we had to really cull it down because there was so much information, but it's really compacted with great stories and great ways to embrace it, to not be, like we talked about, not be stopped by fear, and be aware and become those architects of tomorrow, which I absolutely love. Here's the question for you, our world number one futurist, Mark. What is an emerging technology that you are most excited about, and what will its impact be in years to come?
That's such a difficult question. It's almost asking who of your kids is your favorite kid. There's so many different technologies, and all come with their own pros and cons. And I think what I'm most excited about is where we see this convergence of these technologies. I cover 8 different technologies in the book, and I come from a very easy to understand perspective, so anyone can really grasp what I'm trying to say. And they all offer something. Quantum computing will help us solve the world's biggest problems. AI will help to, and robotics will automate a lot of the work that we don't like to do ourselves and help find new solutions, for example, in healthcare. Synthetic biology will allow us to get rid of all disease and live longer. 3D printing will completely upend geopolitics in a way that can be really beneficial for society. There are all these technologies that will have individually a massive impact on society, but when they are converging, you can really see the tsunami of change coming our way. I find it really difficult to pinpoint one, because I think they are all exciting, they're all fascinating, they're all moving at breakneck pace, and we all need to start to understand each of these technologies individually, so that we can understand how they are going to converge and how they are going to affect everything of our lives in the coming years.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. So now what? Grab your copy. All the details will be below for you to grab a copy for your team, and really embrace this. So we really thank you, Mark, for pulling together this book that is needed now, and to stop some of the confusion and the fear, and to really allow us all to be as you say, architects of tomorrow together. So thank you so much. Grab the book, the link's there. And again, thank you, Mark.
Thank you for having me.